Good morning and welcome to the Mesa City Council study session for June the 23rd. We are excusing council members Glover and Finter. The first item on our presentation today that I've been looking forward to for quite a while, thank you to everyone who was here to participate in this, is to hear a presentation and provide direction on the Early Childhood Education Task Force recommendations. I know this was chaired by Mr. Luna, so Dave, it seems like we had a. Why don't you set this up for us, if you would, please?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mayor. I've been fortunate and honored to lead the task force on the early childhood education, so it's a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to do that, and my colleagues as well. The task force is comprised of very, very competent people, qualified experts, and community leaders that have identified and recommended the most appropriate ways for the city of Mesa to engage and respond to the challenges of early childhood development. But I want to take a moment to introduce some of our guests. So, Deanna, would you mind standing? She is currently the Director of Public Outreach for Maricopa Community Colleges and Mesa Public Schools. She has a long title. Nancy Salmon, who is here, is also. She's Executive Director she is Vice President, right, of Corporate Communications for Hacienda Healthcare. Thank you for being here. Allison Malady. She's Executive Director of the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College of Preschool, Clinical Assistant Professor of Early Childhood Special Education, Arizona State University.
And an alumni of Mountain View High School.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Linda McKeever. She is Chief Academic Officer, Gilbert Public Schools. Thank you for being here. Cynthia Meldy, who is Regional Director, Southeast Maricopa. First things first, thank you for being here. Not here, but part of the committee was Dr. Aljam Majid, Principal Self-Development Academy. Paul Luna, President and CEO of Helios Foundation. Mike Hutchinson, Project Manager for East Valley Partnership. Mesa Public Schools Curriculum and Instruction Director, Dr. Don Foley. And Jake Brown, Deputy County Attorney for Maricopa County, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. So we want to thank them for participating and being part of this committee. They put a lot of hard work. They have a lot of expertise. They did an amazing job. They dedicated over 500 hours of work, and so we really, really appreciate their efforts. Again, we've been meeting since 2015, focused on defining the importance of early childhood education and learning in Mesa in terms of children from birth to 5 years old. Through this process, they've identified the gaps in services and opportunities to strengthen early childhood experiences for the residents of Mesa. The task force prepared an initial memorandum sharing their early conclusions with us at the beginning of the year, so hopefully my colleagues had the opportunity to look at that. The task force is here to present their final recommendations to Mayor and Council. So what I'd like to do is turn it over to Deanna, and as well as Allison, and as well as Cynthia, and they're going to do a presentation. But before, I would be remiss if I didn't thank my city staff, particularly Natalie Lewis, Neil Curley, Marisa Ramirez Ramos, for all their hard work, as well as Amy Trethaway and Ricardo Villa Sanchez, who helped us over at the Mesa Council on College, and Karen Kurtz, who led the process as we developed this presentation. And if you had an opportunity to look at the presentation itself, Mark Cornell put a beautiful piece of work together, and he did a stellar job, so I want to thank him for all his hard work. So I pass it on to Deanna.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Council, for your time this morning, and a special thanks to the Mayor for convening this task force and recognizing that this is a need in our community. And the reality is that we're looking at this issue because there's a need that current resources, structures, and programs just aren't meeting. We wouldn't be here this morning if that weren't the case. I'd like to emphasize that in the last line of this slide, it's about college and career readiness. So people, sometimes have the impression that early childhood education is just daycare or making sure kids are in a safe place and taken care of. And while that's part of it, it's really about that first step in the educational spectrum and making sure that our students are prepared to succeed. And this really does have, as you will see later on, ties to economic development and our community sustainability. I've had the question often asked, why is the city even looking at this? The city is charged with the health of our community, and that includes making sure that our earliest, youngest learners are ready to learn so that they, in turn, can be successful long term. It really is about the community's health, the ability of our own Mesa kids to be successful, ready for career, ready for college, and this is the first step in that process. So our process did include extensive meetings, as Councilmember Luna alluded to, lots of research around best practices, data, more data, more data. Site visits to lots of stellar programs in the community. We do have some great assets. We visited what worked best. We visited other communities. Special thanks to City Manager Brady for facilitating that process for us. After considering existing resources, capacity, needs, best practices, data, we do present to you these findings and recommendations using our own MESA lens. I'm going to turn it over right now to Cynthia to take you through our next slide.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. It's a pleasure to be here. I get the opportunity to share why early childhood matters and some statistics about MESA and what it looks like today. 90% of critical brain development happens before kindergarten. The skills that employers are looking for, which include focus, attention, self-discipline, motivation, and ability to collaborate with others, take root before the age of 5. Gaps in children's vocabulary occur and can be detected by the age of 18 months. And by the time children are 3 to 4 years old, their vocabulary, attention, and general knowledge can predict 3rd and 4th grade reading comprehension. National studies show that children exposed to high-quality early childhood education have better language, math, and social skills. Nationally, 1 in 2 children ages 3 to 4 are enrolled in preschool or childcare. In Mesa, that statistic is 1 in 3. There are currently 31,238 children under the age of 5 living in Mesa, and the current capacity for childcare facilities is 14,886. Affordability of quality childcare is a large concern and likely explains part of the reduced enrollment. The annual cost to provide care for a preschooler is $8,400 a year, which is 14% of the median income for Mesa's families with children. The Department of Health and Human Services considers 10% to be affordable. 1 in 4 families with young children living in Mesa are living in poverty. This means that they're living on an income of $24,300 if they're a family of 4 or less. Research shows that for every dollar invested in early childhood, the community gets back $7 to $16 in return, whether it be through an improved tax base, a reduction in the cost of remedial education, and the criminal justice system. Now I'll pass it over to Dr. Milady to talk about how we prepare early learners for school.
So we spent a lot of time talking about what that quality preschool experience would look like. And I think we spent a lot of time making sure to reinforce the idea that it's not just about putting kids into preschool, that it has to be a quality environment and it has to have quality, highly trained teachers. So what does that look like? So we've talked about kind of the big picture of why it's important and how it impacts the community, but what does a quality early learning environment look like if you walk in there any day of the week? So the first thing is we need to make sure that we have high quality teachers in those classrooms and that they are helping children use higher level thinking skills. So if you walk into a preschool classroom of top quality, you're going to see kids planning and brainstorming and having conversations and experimenting. And to the outside person, it might not look that complicated, but that teacher, if they have a strong background in child development and early childhood education, that's all been intentional. So they are intentionally putting certain materials in the classroom. They're intentionally putting literacy in the environment. They're intentionally planning the kinds of questions and the interactions that they're going to have with those kids so that they can build those thinking skills. So building those foundations of literacy and math and more importantly, I would say social emotional development. So when you see kids stacking blocks or putting, a cardboard tube up and seeing how a car rolls down it, those are all the foundations of algebra and geometry and physics. And those are the things that we need to make sure that these kids have access to early on. Things with language. So again, even just the environment, having print in the environment, having tools for kids to write, and having them begin to understand that when they scribble on a piece of paper and tell a story with that, that's communicating to someone, and that's important, and it's something that we all need to learn and be able to use. The social and emotional regulation, and I know that we're going to talk a little bit more, too, about all of the ways that early childhood impacts kids as they grow older, but that's a piece that I think that we focus on quite a bit in a quality setting, is how do you help children learn to regulate their emotions? How do you help them learn to have appropriate social skills? There's lots of research now, including longitudinal studies, that show that those self-regulation skills are critically important to people being successful later on. We're all using them right now, right? I mean, we're all sitting here listening, and we know the social norm and what we're supposed to be doing. And those are things that we, regardless of how those kids use math or literacy and all the academic skills that we need them to know, that other layer of it is the social emotional development that is heightened by a quality early childhood classroom, because they have peer interactions and those quality teachers who are helping them engage in appropriate ways with each other. So we know it matters. So we know from brain development and the science behind that, and we know from the economic development, we know with 100% certainty that early childhood matters. So we're here today to present our findings and hopefully have you think about moving forward to the next level of fully supporting it.
Thank you, Dr. Mulady. In terms of what's already been referenced and ties to economic development, this is really the foundational building block that we can predict a student's success, a child's success, and really our community's success. Children who have access to early learning and quality early learning environments, more likely to read at grade level by 4th grade, more likely to graduate from high school, more likely to attend college, more likely to be in good health, to find and hold a living wage job. So again, we're talking about economic development. It's not just a feel-good exercise about kids. It really is about quality and making sure that our kids are best prepared so that our community is best prepared to move forward. They're less likely to be held back, referred for special services. The list goes on and on. Less likelihood of engaging in risky teen behaviors. So really these early years are critically important, has already been emphasized. And I can't emphasize enough, it's not just about early learning from 0 to 5, it's directly related to the long-term health of our community. So it's not just a school's issue, it's not just a parent's issue to make their kids ready, it's not just a family issue, it really is a community issue. So that's why we're asking you to take a particular look at this. We know that there's a lot of work involved in this, so we fully acknowledge that. In fact, we have a list of acknowledgments that we want to make sure that you recognize, that we have recognized. So in terms of workforce development, in order to retain, attract employers with high-paying wages, this does matter for our community. In terms of funding and resources, yes, it will take funding and resources. We're talking about an awful lot of little kiddos that need assistance in our community. It will take an investment on our part. If the capacity in our state, which used to fund full-day kindergarten and a variety of programs and no longer does, if they were doing it, we'd already have this issue solved. If the schools were able to do it, we'd have this issue solved. If the current community resources and organizations were able to do this, we would already have this solved. It will take additional investment on our part. In terms of community response and ownership, again, it's not just a parent's issue or a family's issue. This is a community issue. If we're talking about the health of our kiddos and the long-term health of our community, we can't just lay it at the feet of any one institution or one entity in our city. It really is a community-owned issue and should have community-owned solutions. In terms of partnerships, we recognize that there's a lot of good, stellar work going on in our community. There's just not enough of it. So how do we bring people together to leverage our existing resources and fuse some new resources so that we can increase that capacity? And we don't use the term flippantly. A lot of people like to talk about collaboration and partnership, but as someone with 20 years in this community trying to do it, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes resources, and it takes a lot of will. So partnerships absolutely critical, but there is some heavy lifting to do around the issue of partnership and collaboration. In terms of quality and parental choice, this has been one of our ongoing discussions. Parents will choose different settings for their child. For some, it might be a full-day program where their needs are best met. For some, it might be a half-day program. For some, it means in-home care with a relative or a caregiver down the street. For some, it may be staying home with mom and dad if they're fortunate enough to be able to do so. Parental choice is absolutely something we'd like to respect. Our mantra has been there should be high-quality childcare provided no matter what setting is chosen. So whether it's a half-day program, we want it to be the best quality. Whether it's a full-day program, best quality. If it's like my own son, who was fortunate enough to be down the road from grandma and grandpa with an excellent caregiver in a home with some other kiddos, we want to make sure that there's some quality learning taking place in that environment as well. So it's not about a one-size solution, making sure that kids are plugged into different programs. So it's about respecting the choices of the family and how can we make sure that each individual choice has quality behind it. We realize that this is a lot to ask, and there's going to be some heavy lifting with this, but we also think it's worth it. So we do have some additional recommendations for you. As Councilmember Luna alluded to, it's a great report. It's a pretty report. It's an informative report. We hope that you really take a look at it and all the data points within it. We hope it doesn't stay a pretty report on a shelf, that we hope that there's actually some action behind it, which leads us to a couple of calls to action. For those of you council members who are parents, you know that kids grow up fast. They grow up in the blink of an eye. If we don't start now, we're already going to have a generation of 3, 4, 5-year-olds that we've lost. So we want to make sure that we start immediately working towards some solutions. As was said, we do have some great assets in our community. We want to build upon what's already existing. Mesa has one 5-star quality early childhood center at Mesa Community College. That's a great resource, but they're at capacity. There's only so many little bodies you can squish into a building. How do we make sure that we're leveraging and building additional partnerships so that we see quality across the board? No one entity can do it alone. Schools can't do it alone, programs can't do it alone, community resources can't do it alone. So again, how do we bring people together to make sure that we're leveraging what good we have and infusing some new resources so that we can increase the amount of good being done? Supporting family choice, absolutely. So again, whatever setting parents choose for their children, we want to make sure that there's some quality behind it, no matter what setting that might be. Not all kids and families right now have the same access to resources. I think Councilmember Thompson might appreciate this. You know, we've heard the analogy about food deserts, the availability of good food in certain parts of town. We're looking at some deserts in our community where people's resources in certain communities, certain neighborhoods are not matching the ability to access resources. How do we make sure that all of our kids reach school and the start of school at the same starting line? Right now, our kids are not all at the same starting line. We have some families that, because of geographic, transportation issues, cultural issues, financial issues, are just not able to access what's out there. So how can we make sure that, again, all families have the same kind of access to resources, no matter what choices, again, they're making? An aggressive community awareness campaign, excuse me, a lot of PR behind this. We'd like to see this as an initiative that the city is pursuing along a number of different fronts. You all have some great plans in place, Parks and Rec planning and city planning and general plans, and we'd like to see references to the importance of early education infused across the board. If we're talking about economic development and, again, the health of our community, which has a huge educational component, then how can we make sure that that's reflected in all of your ongoing work? How do we make sure that our community, our Mesa families, and everyone in Mesa is aware that this is a priority and why this is important, again, to the health of our community? Insisting on quality. Again, wherever a child might find themselves, we want to make sure that it's a quality environment, whether it's a full day program, whether it's something that's in home, whether it's with a private caregiver, whether it's with the family. How do we ensure that kids are accessing the resources and learning that's needed to make them successful moving forward? How do we raise the capacity for all of those good programs that we have? And I guess one of the things that we really spend a lot of time talking about in terms of a task force is who is going to champion this. We have dedicated task force members here this morning, and unfortunately those that aren't able to be with us today. We're dedicated. We're giving our time already. We want to see this continue, but it will take somebody to champion it from the city to collaborate and to build these partnerships. And again, we don't use the term flippantly. Working together across different organizations, across different community resources, across different neighborhoods takes some very dedicated time and some heavy lifting. Partnerships are not easy. So again, we would ask that as a minimum first step, somebody's designated to champion this and give it the time that's needed. Even to pull together the existing positive resources that we have will take some time. Getting people to work together, brainstorming ways to increase capacity. Someone has to be able to do that. Those would be our initial recommendations. Each one of these is a theme of recommendations, and the details are in your report. So again, I would encourage you to take a look at that. I think there's some very creative thinking, some steps that we can be taking now. But even in terms of the low-hanging fruit, again, it's going to be time and energy, and that's what we would ask of you today. So with that said, questions, comments?
Mr. Luna.
Just real quickly, we had also Dr. Jim Zahara as part of our task force, but this conversation actually began with you, Mayor, speaking with Dr. Cowan, and we're very fortunate Dr. Cowan made a presentation asking the city to assist with pre-K education. As you know, many kids coming into our kindergartens lack the skills necessary to move them forward. They're just not ready. So he's asked us as a community to look at pre-K education as a means of trying to prepare these kids for better futures as they go into kindergartens.
Thank you. Great presentation. Questions, Mr. Kavanaugh?
Just a comment. I really appreciate the depth and breadth of the report. So many cities here in the West have developed governmental structures where city councils and cities are divorced from the educational system, and that's a mistake. I'm not advocating for a city to be the school board for the community colleges or the public school system, but as your report illustrates, the health of a community is directly related to the educational opportunities and development that our children receive, and in terms of services that we provide or are required to respond to as part of the community, in terms of whether it's economic development, whether it's public safety, whether it's human resource assistance to people. Those are all directly affected by the quality of education and opportunities for our kids. And I think you've really made a very strong case statement for community engagement and involvement for a whole variety of positive reasons. And so I just want to commend you on it, and I hope that our community moves forward to create and engage those partnerships, collaborations, to increase the resources for our kids. Thank you, Mr. Luna, for leading this.
Mr. Richens.
I think the question I need to ask is how much? What's it going to take to provide the quality that you guys envision and the numbers that we have in the gap? If we were to provide that opportunity for everybody, what's the number? How much does that cost?
Lots. I will add.
That's great with statistics. I'm sure you quantified it.
Yeah, it really depends on what parents are going to choose. If we were to provide a full day program for every kid in that gap, yes, it would be a huge amount. I'm not sure that all parents are going to choose that. So again, I'm going to emphasize that it can't be a singular solution. We have the data that shows roughly $8,700 for a child in a full day program. So you can multiply it by the number of kids that don't have access right now. What I think why it's so important to have somebody at the city level championing this is to figure out what other resources we can bring to bear. There are going to be a substantial number, and I've worked with families who will make the choice to keep children at home or in an in-home environment. And again, we want to be respectful of a parent's choice. That's going to require a different level of resources to make sure that whoever that caregiver is in that private home setting has some tools that they can work with kids in their own care. Again, so that they are having some quality learning experiences, not necessarily a full-day program. Those are some of the things that we need to figure out long-term that we just weren't able to determine quite at this point.
And it goes back to leveraging the partnerships and the resources that are there. So you have some school-based programs and the program at Maricopa or Mesa Community College that are of high quality that you can leverage. There's the potential partnership with ASU, where we've talked about how could we bring an early childhood component to that. So there's pieces that we can leverage, but also just to reinforce that we're not saying let's just build a bunch of preschools and put all the kids in it. We have to look at it from a lot of different angles so that we can support people where they are in whatever capacity they want their children to be cared for.
And if I can just add a little bit, with First Things First, our regional council has about $10.1 million to address Mesa, Gilbert, and Queen Creek, where there's about 70,000 children between the ages of 0 to 5. You do the math, that's about $150 to $200 per child. We're stretching ourselves thin trying to invest in early childhood, and so the scale of what we need to do is much larger than that, and the regional council is very interested in bringing about more strategic partnerships. Not one agency is going to be able to solve this issue, and that's the really big part of the conversation that we need to continue. To give you some numbers, just to give you some idea, The Regional Council invests $3.1 million for scholarships to high-quality childcare, preschool, or infant and toddler programs. Our average scholarship cost is about $9,000 per child. It's more costly for infants and toddlers than it is for 3- and 4-year-olds. And that gets about 329 children living in low-income families, 200% of the federal poverty line or below, into quality childcare.
I was just kind of reading through your statistics. So there's a maximum slot number in Mesa, 14,800 available. Are all of those facilities maxed out then? Are all 14,886 slots filled?
No.
The data that licensed facilities report is their capacity. What we don't know is enrollment, and enrollment can change on a daily basis, as families are moving throughout the communities. So we haven't had the opportunity to do kind of that capacity demand type of survey in the communities.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, let me just add my thanks to those of Mr. Richens and others already. As Mr. Richens indicated, this kind of the germ of this idea, I think, came from a sobering conversation I had with Dr. Cowan, where he talked about the how well poverty is doing in our community and the impact that was having on the kindergarten assessments that he was seeing at Mesa Public Schools, and the frustration he felt because he had little resources to respond to that situation because K-12 funding is K-12 funding.
Right.
It's not pre-K funding. So this is, I think intuitively we all knew that this was what we would find when we dived into this a little deeper, and so thank you for doing that due diligence. We invited you to do this because you're the cream of the crop, and we wanted to make sure this was done well, and you certainly haven't disappointed. The presentation itself is great. I think you're right. Mr. Cornell's work product and your work product in terms of the text and the arguments that are made are stellar, and so we need to make sure we publish this and that this gets dispersed widely and that it's on all of our desks and it becomes a Bible rather than something that's taking up some space on our bookshelf. So I'll encourage that to happen, and hopefully that will. Again, I think it confirms what we already know, which is that, frankly, Mesa is becoming a poorer and poorer community, and that impacts our academic attainment and success. That is trending downward. And unless we accept a call to action and do something and make efforts to change the trajectory, it will continue in that direction. That presents some real challenges. Like you say, this is not an easy lift. This is going to have to really be ingrained into our organizations, not just the city governments, but school districts and everyone else that has a role to play in this. But I think the situation is dire enough, and we all appreciate it enough, that it will have the impact that it needs to. And I do see the will in our community to respond to this challenge. I certainly feel it here. So the thing I like the most about your report is that it says, here's a call to action. Here's 5-6 things we would like you to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm committed to doing what we can to do those things. The first is to plan forward immediately. And I've asked Mr. Brady about this yesterday after I read the full report. And he had already read the report before I had. And had already started, I think the gears had started to turn in his mind as well. So I'm going to, as we've done over the past few months, as we've identified needs in our community, thankfully what we do is turn to Mr. Brady and say, come back to us with a plan as to how we're going to solve this.
Well, good thing we already have most of it written.
That's right. So, Mr. Brady, please come back to us with a plan for how we're going to solve this. But more precisely to how we're going to respond to the action items that you've identified for us. And I think they are very good. I'm looking forward to identifying someone within our organization to become an advocate and lead the charge on this. I love the idea of establishing an early childhood advisory committee. I'm going to work on that. And the other things in here that, just so you know, I think sooner than later we can make some progress on this. One of the items under support family choice was to invest in new tools. I think we've got one of the real advocates for early childhood education in our community for a couple of decades now has been Mr. Whiteman, John Whiteman. He's been desperately trying to hand me a check for $10,000 to work on this problem for the last several months. I think we now know what to do with that money, so I confirmed with him yesterday, and he'd be delighted if we use that to prepare the first $10,000 worth of toolkits that we can have in the Mesa Public Libraries or in other places so that Mesa families can come in, check these out, go home. Hopefully we need to maybe talk with Mesa Public Schools and get Dr. Cowan's kindergarten assessment list. You know, what are the schools, what are the list of things that we want a kindergarten child when they show up to school in Mesa to know? You know, colors and numbers and all of those skills that we want, the basic skills we want a kindergartner to have when he or she shows up for the first day of class. So I'm excited that we'll develop and build, at least get a start right out of the bat with Mr. Whiteman's generous contribution. But the reason I throw that out is just so that you know we're not going to take your report and set it on a shelf. We're going to take it as an action item list, and we'll start working on it. And I'm looking forward to city staff's response, a more detailed plan. We've got a great city staff. They do come back with a good response that they will to these recommendations, and this will become something that we work on diligently, probably for as long as any of us continue to have these positions. And given that we're going to establish an early childhood advisory committee, you might not be real comfortable because we might be asking you to continue to serve in some capacity on that. Dr. Milady, I'm coveting your program in our community. People might know that it's no secret one of the programs at ASU that we're hoping to bring to Mesa is the early childhood education program. If we can get you and your program here, I think that will, again, just demonstrate that we've got the will in our community, and this is what we want to be good at. This is what we want to spend resources on and take advantage of partnering with institutions like ASU on. So we hope to get to see you down here much more often, have you come back to Mesa, your hometown.
Yep.
So again, I'll just say thank you very much, and Mr. Brady, I know you're familiar with this report. I know you've read it, and we look forward. I would ask you to give us your response to this and see what it is in terms of reprioritizing community resources that we can do in the short term to address this. For those who think that it's a stretch for city government to be involved in this, I hate to disappoint you, but between libraries and museums and parks and recreation programs and a lot of the other things we're already doing a lot of this, and it's just a matter of tweaking things so that we're all maybe focusing on some shared goals and priorities. So this is not that much of a stretch for us, frankly, in my opinion. So thank you very much. Any other questions or comments, Council? Ladies, thank you very much. Great presentation. Next item on our agenda is to hear a presentation and provide direction on the proposed audit plan for fiscal year 2016-17. Pleased to have our city auditor, Jennifer Ruttman, here. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you. Morning, Mayor, council members. We go through this once a year. We bring an audit plan to the council, which outlays what we are going to be doing for the next 12 months, and we do that through the Audit and Finance Committee, and we do that because the full council should have a right to or the opportunity to voice their opinion about what the city auditor's office does during the year, and that, to ensure that we're doing what it is that to address your concerns and to basically meet the needs of the council, which is our prime directive is from you. So we wanted to give you all the opportunity to weigh in on the audit plan. and rather than just the 3 members of the Audit and Finance Committee. They have forwarded the plan to you as it is. This year we have a theme established of a large number of our audits are centered around contract monitoring. And we have selected several different departments that we believe have contracts and or agreements that are directly related to some of the concerns that have been voiced to us by the council. And so we want to address those things in addition to making sure the city's protected going into the future and managing contracts. It's also something that's presented itself as a common theme over the last couple of years in other audits where we determined that there may be some contract monitoring deficiencies in departments where they could use some assistance in strengthening those activities. And so there are contracts and or agreements in the arts and culture, community services, human resources, parks, recreation, and community facilities, and transportation department that we felt were worthy of our time and resources to take a look at. And so the other audits that have come onto our plan this year, one is in development services, looking at construction permits with the uptick in construction activity in the city. Recently, we want to make sure that the right processes are in place and resources in order to ensure that the revenues that come in from that are, in fact, that we get all the revenues and that they're accounted for. So in any case, the other one is actually a carryover from the previous year that we actually postponed for the police department in their supplies and equipment area because they were in the middle of implementing some major improvements to that program, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to get that fully in place before we came and took a look and see if there's still anything that needs to be done. And so we agreed to come back this year, which we will do. There are some additional things if we have time. The financial services and engineering, one is fixed asset and construction work in progress, and the reason we are that kind of fell onto our risk assessment list this year was due to the repeated mention of this issue by our external auditors when they audit our comprehensive annual financial statement. And so that is something that we felt would be worth taking a look at. In addition to the Mesa Arts Center, which is something we try to get to once every several years as a revenue producer to make sure that, I say revenue producer, I don't mean profit producer, obviously, but in any case, to make sure that they are accounting for revenues in the box office areas is primarily where we feel our efforts are warranted. So those are the new things for this year. We still have a number of things carried over currently work in progress that the council will receive reports on those after the break. But those projects are still in the reporting phase, so we're working on getting the reports out and responses from management on those. And so with that, if the council has other suggestions for things that they don't see on the plan that they feel like that we need to direct some resources toward, please, now's the time that we would like those suggestions.
Sorry. Thank you, Jennifer. Mr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you. I want to compliment you on your report. One of the things I'm most proud of in terms of my work in public service is working with the Finance in the Future Committee to really strengthen our internal audit process and having an independent auditor. And I think that you and your staff have done a stellar job since the voters approved that mechanism. We haven't had the bad headlines that some other cities are having, including one large one on the west side, that because of the work that you do. And the work that you do really, you haven't uncovered bad or evil things going on, but you've identified better practices for us to use to manage our resources wisely and to identify practices at departments that can streamline and be more transparent and provide confidence in the community and the council and what you do. And so I appreciate the council of the audit committee working with you to recommend the plan of action for this coming year. And again, I think the work that you and your staff do really helps build confidence in the community. I know I have confidence that we are a very, very well managed city. We have a good, strong management structure, and that your work helps. The old phrase we used to do is continuous quality improvement, but that's really what is the outcome of the work that you do. So I just want to thank you for your recommendations and your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Luna.
I also want to commend you. I thank you for being here. I really appreciate all the hard work that you do, and really for keeping us out of trouble. And it's because of you. And so
I don't know if I can take credit for that.
Yeah. Well, we want to make sure that somebody's watching what's going on. So we really appreciate all the hard work that you do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Richards.
It's time for my annual statement too, which is, Mr. Brady and management, it's important that we listen to the auditor's recommendations and we follow through on all the follow-up actions. So she'll have a lot of actions that say, hey, we need to do this. We need to make sure that that gets driven all the way through the organization every time. It's really the more transparency that we can provide to the public, the more confidence they have that we're going to handle those precious funds that we get with with care and appropriateness, and that we don't do things that are out of scope, that we recover the funds when we can. And I know that's a challenge sometimes. There are some tough things that have to get implemented and people get their feelings hurt. And this isn't about personalities and feelings. This is about taxpayer money, and it's about making sure that we have implemented everything. We have a great team at the City of Mesa, amazing department heads, amazing employees all the way through the organization, and have a lot of confidence. And I brag about you guys all the time when I'm out in other communities. But this is important. If there's anything that you can put on your priority list as a manager for the city, that when the auditor comes and does an audit, it's collaborative. You guys are working together to make it better. And it's not personal, but those implementations, those changes that have to be made must be made. It's not an option. And that, from Manager Brady all the way through the organization, that needs to get driven through to everyone. And that message needs to be loud and clear for everyone. The council demands it, the public demands it. We're held accountable for the things that the city is done and does. So I just want to encourage everyone that when they get those recommendations, don't take them personally. They're not meant to be personal. They're just making our city that much better, and we are an amazing place. And so I appreciate everything that everyone does to implement those recommendations, because I know it's tough. Nobody likes to get audited. I get it. But the voters put this role in place to make sure that we were accountable. And I appreciate all the work that everyone does to keep their departments accountable. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Amen to what these guys have said. You're great. I'm glad we have your position, and you do a good job of it. And thank you. The plan you presented to me looks great, and I don't have any additions to it. I think thank you for keeping us off the headlines as little as possible. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, council will move on to the next agenda item, which is to discuss and provide direction to the city attorney regarding the possible appeal of the tax court case involving multiple cities, including Mesa and certain online travel companies. Mr. Smith.
Yeah. Mayor and council, we have some good news for you, and you have a request. I don't want to steal the thunder. I think Kelly and Mickey are going to come up. Oh, they were thinking I was going to steal their thunder. They thought I would start, and then they wouldn't even have to come up, but I wasn't going to do that. So we'll share with you some good news and have a request for you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We are here with some good news this morning, and it's always better to sit in front of Council with good news than the other. We wanted to let you know that on the online travel tax case, which Council had approved that the city be a part of in 2014, that a definite win has happened recently. The judge in that tax court case has made the decision in a motion for summary judgment ruling that certain online travel tax companies' business activities are taxable under our model city tax code. The judge in that same ruling also made the decision, however, that we couldn't apply them retroactively prior to 2013. So the cities have gone ahead and filed a motion for reconsidering, asking the judge to reconsider the issue of the retroactivity. But what we're here this morning seeking is direction from council in regard to participating both in defending and filing an appeal up to the next level on this particular case. We've set aside some time for an e-session this morning in order to answer any particular questions that you may have on this issue, and Mickey's available to answer any questions on the tax court side of it. But outside of that, the motion that we were looking for this morning is just, and this is the wording that we were looking for, is authorizing the City of Mesa to file or defend an appeal of the tax court case of the City of Phoenix versus Orbitz.
Thank you. I know that there was a memo that went out on this earlier that explained things, I thought, pretty well. So my questions regarding this issue have been resolved. But
I have a couple of questions that I'd probably rather ask in executive session when we go there, and then hopefully when we come back out, we could make a motion on this.
That's fine. Yes, thank you.
So, Mayor, if you want to, we could make the motion and just sort of hold this agenda item right now. We can make a motion to go into executive session now, and then we can handle that right now and then come back out and
Perfect.
handle the motion.
Is there a motion to convene an executive session? Thank you. In a second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We will convene an executive session, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We have reconvened following the executive session. I think I'm now, unless there's additional comments, I would entertain a motion on this agenda item.
If I may restate the motion just so we have it in the record, if that's all right.
Please.
So what we're seeking is a motion authorizing the City of Mesa to file or defend an appeal of the tax court case of City of Phoenix versus Orbitz.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make that motion? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Seconded by Mr. Luna. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes. Next item on our agenda is approval of minutes from an executive session held on May 26, 2016. There's a motion by Mr. Kavanaugh and seconded by Mr. Luna. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Next item is information pertaining to the current job order contracting projects. Mr. Kavanaugh.
Not really a question, but a word of thanks to Mark and his staff on the two projects at Kingsborough Park and Rancho Del Mar. This is another example of great follow-through on the Parks Bond approved by voters, because one thing we heard loud and clear, and we continue to hear loud and clear, is implementing shade structures at our playground facilities at parks. And as Mark has taught me, they're not cheap, but I think they're a great investment for safety and livability for the community. So I just wanted to add my appreciation for the follow-through on those. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is hear reports on meetings and conferences attended. Anything you'd like to share with us, Council? Hearing none. Next item is scheduling of meetings and general information. Mr. Brady.
Yes, Mayor and Council, we will be canceling the June 30th study session. And just a reminder, the Arizona Celebration of Freedom will be Monday, July 4th from 6 to 10 p.m. right here at the Mesa Convention Center complex. Thank you very much.
Can you briefly hit on our July meeting schedule for council meetings? We usually do two at the very beginning of the month.
Sure. So our first council meeting in July will be July 5th. And then
Tuesday, July 6th.
Tuesday. Did I say? Oh, okay. Yes. Tuesday, July 5th. Tuesday, July 5th. And then the second meeting in July will be Monday, July 11th. No study session on July 7th.
So we won't have another study session until August?
Right. We may have some items. Do we have some items on the 11th, I think? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, we'll have it on the Monday.
But no Thursday.
Thursday,
Yes,
morning.
no Thursday. The next Thursday study session would be August 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.